working with function, or working with functions. This question has given us some information. What we're going to do is try to organize it several different ways. So here's our first question. The number of days in a month, okay, so this deals with the number of days in a month, and the average daily temperature. They've corresponded them. So 0 days had a daily temperature or average of 0. 2 days had a daily temperature of 2. 2 more days had a daily temperature of negative. Like we said, 2 more days had a daily temperature of negative 2. 4 days had a daily temperature of negative 4. And 4 days also had a daily temperature of 4. These are actually coordinates, and we're going to represent them in several different ways. Okay? So, first way we're going to represent them is in a table of values chart. Our table of values chart, we just have to determine which will be our x and which will be our y. And what we're going to do is we're going to call the number of days our x values, and the daily temperatures are y values. Okay? So as we write this as a table of values, we have 0, 2 as a coordinate. Sorry, that's not right. 0, 0 as a coordinate. 0 and 0 are our coordinates, and the reason they're a coordinate is because these two correspond to each other. Then we have 2 and 2 as another coordinate. Okay, so 2 days had a temperature of 2. 2 more days had a temperature of negative 2. 4 days had a temperature of negative 4. And 4 more days had a temperature of 4. Okay. So this is how we represent this information as a table of values. Something else we're going to be using are called mapping diagrams. Okay. Mapping diagrams are a little different from what we've seen before. If you guys look in your textbook, they're going to be represented with ovals. Okay, elongated ovals. And instead what they do is they take each x and y value and only put them in once. So, we're going to highlight this and kind of create this. There's only one x value of 0. So I put in this value of 0. There are 2 x values of 2. I'm only going to put the number 2 in for the x values once. Okay? And there are also 2 x values of 4. So there's really only 3 numbers I'm going to put in my x values. 0, 2, and 4. In our y values, we have negative 2, negative 4, 0, 2, and 4. So I'm going to put them in order. Okay? Should be negative 4 first. None of them repeat, so I'm going to put each of them in. Negative 4, negative 2, 0, 2, and 4. Now, we've got to figure out how they correspond to each other. In order to figure that out, we've got to look at how these guys are as coordinates. Okay? So this is technically a coordinate here, 0 and 0. So I know the x value 0, with an arrow, I'm going to represent what it goes to. It's going to go to the value of 0. Okay? The first true value goes to the value of 2, but the second one goes to the value of negative 2, so we're actually going to have 2 arrows coming from that one x coordinate. Okay? And then finally, the same idea is present with our 4s. Okay? We know our 4 has 2 values. It's going to go to positive and negative 4, so we're going to use our arrows to represent this. So in a mapping diagram, it's a little simpler to write the numbers out. You only write them out once. You never duplicate them. But we know that there can be duplicates depending on how many arrows come or go to the same number. Okay? So we might have to take these mapping diagrams and write coordinates. And the next way we're going to focus on this is the actual coordinates themselves. Those are very simple to look at. We really just got to take the table of values and write them out. 0 and 0, that's one coordinate. 2 and 2 is another. 2 and negative 2. 4 and -4, and finally 4 and 4. So these are written as just coordinates. Coordinates, is that right? Yeah, I think it's. The last way we can represent all of these is on a graph, okay? Just by plotting the points that we have. Sometimes it's easiest if we just put our things into coordinates first and then focus on putting them in a graph. That way it's very easy to see where each of the points are. We have one coordinate at 0 and 0, another one at 2 and 2, another one at 2 and -2, another one at 4 and -4, finally the last one at 4 and 4. So if you guys notice our coordinates, we have 5 different coordinates and they're all a little separate here. Okay? We've plotted them. This is the next way we can represent them with a graph. Okay? So all we've done is represented these coordinates 4 different ways. Let's recap quickly. We used a table of values to represent them, a mapping diagram, coordinates, and by graphing. There are 4 different ways we went about representing all of these.